Is Perry going to come? Or we just... All right. Thank you very much for joining us here today. I'm Port of Seattle Commission President Fred Fellerman, and we're delighted to be brought here together by Senator Cantwell, who has been a great champion of the environment, and specifically today to talk about her efforts to make sustainable aviation fuels cost-effective so that we can benefit from our aviation industry's reduction in air emissions, both the particulates as well as the greenhouse gases, both of which are very important both to our local communities as well as to the climate at large. So SeaTac is the 8th busiest airport and one of the fastest growing in the country. So providing that level of service is a great thing, but also comes with it a huge responsibility. As a public agency, as a public port, we need to do our part to minimize those impacts, both on our surrounding communities and on the climate at large. And we set a goal as the Port Commission to utilize regionally produced sustainable aviation fuels 10% in 10 years. So that would be by 2028. It's an overly ambitious goal, but you have to aim high. And what that would mean is 67 million gallons of fuel would be averted from conventional petroleum fuel, so that we could then produce less particulates and have less impact on the climate. These are huge, ambitious goals, but the challenge has been twofold. One is having enough production capability, especially if you want to do it regionally, and we'll hear from some folks here that are doing that. The other is having it cost effectively. And what's really been very encouraging is that the airlines have been shown to be willing to use it as much as we can produce it at a cost-effective level. And so what the Senator has done in advancing this legislation is to provide a $1 billion grant for airlines and folks to be able to get the production level costs down, as well as a tax credit to the blending this into the fuel system. We are in the process of actually building yet another tank in our tank farm, so that we could actually have a blending spot right here at Seattle. Unfortunately, right now, all the fuel that's produced goes to California or Oregon, where they have these low carbon fuel credits. We just passed, the state legislature that is, just passed the low carbon fuel standard and the Climate Commitment Act, which will actively enable us to make fuels more cost effective. However, we need the support of the federal government, and it's going to be critical to have the partnership we have with the Senator here to make that happen. So without further ado, I would like to pass it on to one of the leaders in the airline decarbonization business, Diana Burkett-Rakow.
Thanks, Fred.
With Alaska Airlines.
Thanks, Commissioner. Yes, I represent Alaska Airlines, and we have a path to net zero that I'll tell you about. But first of all, I'm really honored and appreciative, Senator, that you brought us together. Not only our home state senator and a phenomenal representative for us in Washington, D.C., often a passenger on board Alaska Airlines, flights 2 and 4, I believe, going back and forth, but also the chair of, for the entire country, the chair of the Commerce, Science and Transportation Committee, and we really, really appreciate your leadership in trying to make sure that we have a sustainable future for aviation, which is critical to a sustainable future for the globe. You have helped over the last couple of years, off topic, but to make sure that we remain a thriving industry even coming out of COVID and able to have these kinds of conversations. So all 22,000 of us really, really appreciate your leadership and support. So today we're here to talk about sustainable aviation fuels and the critical policies that are needed to advance it. And I'll tell you about sort of the role that sustainable aviation fuels plays in Alaska's vision of a sustainable future. To both create net zero climate opportunity and to create jobs. So we have a goal of getting to net zero by 2040. And we have a 5-part path to get there. The first is operational efficiency, managing to eliminate waste and eliminate fuel use from running a very tight operation and using technology that can support that. The second is evolving our fleet with our hometown airline manufacturer, Boeing, and we're in process of doing that, and that will take a chunk out of our carbon footprint, as every 737-9 MAX that we bring into our fleet is 25% more fuel efficient than the aircraft that they're replacing. The third piece is sustainable fuels, and I'll come back to that. The fourth is novel propulsion, and really that's limited to small regional aircraft, which we do have in our fleet, but it is a smaller proportion. And then finally, credible carbon offsets to close the gap. So sustainable fuels is the most variable part of that path to net zero, because we have to make sure, as Fred said, that it is more scalable and that it is viable at a cost-effective price. We love airplanes, we love flying people, but every year we burn 750 million gallons of fuel to do that, and we would love to have a viable alternative. It's the right thing to do. It also increasingly is what our customers are asking us to do, what our employees are asking us to do, and what other stakeholders are asking us to do. So we're grateful to have the partnership and support here. So Alaska's been involved with sustainable fuels for over a decade, flying test flights, et cetera. We offtake from Neste in San Francisco right now, and we also have a phenomenal partnership with Sky Energy Americas, and you'll hear from CEO John Plaza in just a little bit. And John, I think, knows more about SAF than just about anybody I know, except maybe Commissioner Fellman. But really innovative company that is working to make, with us, with Boeing, with others, make sustainable fuels a reality here in the Pacific Northwest. And making it a reality here is particularly important so that we can use it here without additional impacts of transportation. Washington State, who you'll also hear from, is absolutely the cradle of SAF research and has made it clear that this fuel is safe and able to be produced through a variety of methods. So we know through all of these partnerships that SAF is safe and that it can be scaled if we invest in the right places, and that it can reduce up to 80% of carbon emissions on a life cycle basis. So, what do we need to do that? There are two policies in particular that I just want to emphasize Alaska Airlines support for, and I think probably all of our support for. One is authorizing and appropriating $1 billion to a U.S. Department of Transportation grant program focused on supporting investments for projects that produce, transport, blend, or store SAF in the United States, as well as invest in low emissions technologies. This is a policy being championed by the Senator and many of her colleagues, and it's really important. The second one being considered in Congress right now is the 10-year SAF blenders tax credit, ideally $1.50 to $2 per gallon based on performance in terms of reduction of greenhouse gases. So Senator Cantwell was an original sponsor of the Sustainable Skies Act to create that tax credit and is working to make sure that it's included in reconciliation. One thing that I just want to emphasize is that there is no one policy or one solution that's going to make SAF viable at the right price and scalable. And so all of these policies in concert, all of the actions of many partners is actually required to get it into production and into widespread use. And we're really grateful to partner with all of you to do that. So we have a bold goal in the United States of getting to 3 billion gallons of SAF by 2030. If we can, it'll help Alaska to get to net zero. It'll help the industry get to net zero. And so we look forward to support to making sure these policies move forward. So next, I would like to introduce Dr. Michael Walcott from the Washington State University, who has been a phenomenal leader in SAF research. He's the director of the FAA Center for Excellence for Alternative Jet Fuels and the Environment, or, since that's a mouthful, Ascent, a research organization co-led by our own Washington State University and MIT. So, Dr. Walcott, over to you.
Thank you very much, Diana. Appreciate your partnerships over the years. Alaska Airlines has been a tremendous partner from demonstration flights of some of our fuels towards informing policies and research ideas to make our work more impactful to the industry as a whole for that, and thank you for your involvement in that. Also like to thank the Senator who was one of the members who founded Ascent and the FAA Center of Excellence for that. Her unflinching support of Ascent and her vision on this is greatly appreciated by the community as a whole. Glad to see this finally coming around in everyone's verbiage now. So, as Diana indicated, Ascent is the FAA Center of Excellence for Alternative Jet Fuels and Environment. And I'm here representing not only colleagues at Washington State University that participate within Ascent, but also talented researchers from 16 universities nationwide that conduct research to inform the FAA's decision-making in topics of environment and energy. This includes analysis not only to inform issues domestically, but also with international flight through forums such as ICAO, which is the International Civil Aviation Organization that regulates international flight through the UN as a member country. The FAA, or through the FAA, has a strong position within that activity. And lastly, these tools that we use for analysis comes down to the local level. We've worked with the Port of Seattle and Fred in terms of the port's local goals of reduction of or use of sustainable aviation fuels within the airport here, and understanding the viability and the feedstocks and the conversion methodologies that would have to be stood up in order to meet those goals for that. So together with our partners at Pacific Northwest National Labs, we bring this impact back home to this from the national stage from that. The Ascent conducts work in SAF, or Sustainable Aviation Fuels, in two primary fronts. One is in terms of the certification and qualification of fuels, in terms of understanding those processes and tests that have to be conducted to make sure these are safe fuels to be flown, and that the processes are reasonable processes to go through in order to do that. We work with partners at the FAA and with the ASTM to implement that work. In addition to that, we look at supply chains and analytical tools to help inform the production of fuels and the pathways, and understand that there is credible CO2 emissions from those fuels for there. While we also continue to need technological advances that are vital to kind of moving this industry forward and developing these long-term solutions, like we do in our work with Sky Energy Americas, and John Plaza is going to be speaking to you coming up here. Today we mostly need stable policies and programs that help to establish the industry today. If we don't get the industry established today, then we can't make these advances that goes into the future for that. There are two areas for that, sort of echoing Diana's points. One is to build the necessary infrastructure that is required all the way from feedstock to flight for this new industry, and assure that this nascent industry is able to begin and exist. And then secondly, to establish a framework for evaluation of the environmental benefits of sustainable aviation fuels. We hear a lot about the need for sustainable aviation fuels to have the same cost as conventional fuels, and that is correct, because the energy content that is needed for the flight for, say, Alaska Airlines or others has to come in on a cost competitive basis, but they also provide the societal environmental benefits of reduction of greenhouse gas emissions and other issues for that. And so establishing that framework to help to value those and bring that to the companies producing these sustainable products are vitally important. So with that, I'd like to introduce Greg Small, for the Executive Director of Climate Solution. Climate Solution has been a great partner in this policy front with us, and we appreciate your role in this area. So.
Thank you, Michael. Thanks, everybody. Good morning. My name is Greg Small. I'm the Executive Director of Climate Solutions. We're a Northwest-based nonprofit with the mission of accelerating clean energy solutions to the climate crisis. I'm really honored to be here today with Senator Cantwell and all of these amazing partners in support of sustainable aviation fuels. In order to win on climate change at speed and scale, we need to be moving forward with solutions in every sector and every corner of the globe. And it just turns out that our particular corner of the globe here in the Northwest, and particularly here in Washington State, we are well positioned to help lead on one of the most important elements of the climate crisis, which is transportation. Transportation is the single largest source of carbon emissions in the United States, and it has to be a top priority for progress if we're going to get to where we need to go. So aviation, which is what we're here to talk about today, aviation is a significant piece of the transportation puzzle. Today, aviation represents about 11% of total transportation emissions in the United States, and globally, it's at about 2.5% and growing, right? We're seeing more and more aviation. We're going to probably see an increase in that 2.5%. That's why addressing sustainable aviation fuels is so important to that solution. Look, we're trying to electrify everything. We're trying to electrify cars and buses and airplanes and our buildings and everything else. And electrification is going to be an important part of the solution around air travel. But in the short and medium term, it's not going to solve all the problems. In some areas like regional travel, that may be a great solution. But for some solutions, sustainable aviation fuel is the single best step forward that we need to take right now. So this is an issue that people in this region have been looking at for a very long time. At our organization, at Climate Solutions, I look back, it was actually exactly 6 months ago, October of 2015, we released a report on sustainable aviation fuels that had input from lots of the different players here, Boeing and Alaska Airlines and WSU, and academic institutions, businesses, the port. We've been at it for a really, really long time. And there's no way to get to where we need to go and have the solutions coming from our state without a good policy infrastructure in place. We just cannot get there. Some of the other speakers have already talked about that. And that's why I'm so excited for the leadership of Senator Cantwell. I mean, there's no shortage of solutions to be put forward on this in terms of bills, but I particularly want to highlight the one that others have talked about, which is this $1 billion package coming from the Commerce Committee in the reconciliation package. To get to speed and scale, we have got to have policy that can drive down cost and to drive innovation. And we can't get there without these types of investments. So we are very proud to support what you're doing, Senator Cantwell, and to partner with all of you to help to make this happen. So thank you very much for being here. And it's now my pleasure to introduce someone who I've been working with, and Climate Solutions has been working with for well over a decade, John Plaza. Thank you, John.
Thanks, Greg. My name is John Plaza. I'm the CEO of Sky Energy Americas, and I'm an aviator and entrepreneur at heart. So I flew airplanes for a living for 20 years, and in 2000 I was flying a 747 from Anchorage to Tokyo and figured out in that 747 that was almost as old as me, we used enough fuel to power my car for 42 years. And so I decided I had to do something different. And so I started a biofuel company here in the state of Washington called Imperium Renewables. We built a 100 million gallon a year biodiesel plant in Hoquiam. That facility continues to operate today. It wouldn't have been developed and built and be successful without the support of Senator Cantwell. So it's been an honor to work with her on policy from really almost 15 years on biofuel policy. One of the things that Imperium did, and we still are excited about today, is we were chosen by Boeing to be the first producer of sustainable aviation fuel in 2008. So I've been involved in this industry from the beginning. I've partnered with all of the folks around us today, as well as P&L, for the development of technologies, addressing some of the challenges the first generation of biofuels have. And today, Sky Energy is focused on converting methane from landfills and other sources into jet fuel. And with our partners, we've been recently awarded a Department of Energy grant to do just that. And one of the things that has really enabled us to be successful as a company with Sky Energy Americas is our partnerships with those here today. So Alaska Airlines is committed to purchasing fuel from our first facility. We have an offtake agreement and a commitment to purchase fuel from Boeing, as well as an advance payment. So industry leaders, inclusive of Microsoft and others, are really wanting to scale and see this industry be supported and grow to meet the administration's challenges. One of the things that's really critical for us as a company is sustainability. So we consider waste streams to be the only critical input that we would use to convert fuel into aviation fuel. And I think that's why we've established these great partnerships with Alaska and Boeing. You know, one of the things that Washington really does have potential for in this industry is the amount of opportunity that exists, whether it's our clean grid or resources or waste residues, our municipal solid waste. All of these are great feedstocks to sort of transition aviation into a more sustainable industry. I think with this, I'd really like to highlight the the main reason we're here today. And it's really been a privilege for me to work with Senator Cantwell, both as a friend and as an advocate for the industry over the last 15 years. And her engagement and passion for clean tech solutions while creating sort of economic prosperity has really been important both for the nation and for the community. For example, that facility in Grays Harbor still operates today and has 50 family wage jobs that are in a community that needs that kind of support. So as the chair of Senate Commerce and Science Transportation, she really does understand the importance of what policy can impact industry to really grow the green economy. I think it's always important to recognize most of these solutions happen in rural America, and that's where infrastructure investment opportunity are truly needed. I think as we've heard from everybody else, this is an exciting space. I do want to draw a comparison. So in 2004, when I started my last biofuel company, the biodiesel industry was tiny. There was about 5 million gallons of capacity and 63 billion gallons of diesel consumption. Today, that industry is over 3 billion gallons of capacity. In the sustainable aviation fuel industry today, there's one facility in the U.S. of commercial scale that produces 4 million gallons. It's not in Washington. The opportunity for the nation is huge. And really, we're at the cusp of a really exciting growth opportunity in sustainable aviation fuel. And the policies that you heard, both the SAF, BTC, as well as the effort under Senator Cantwell's leadership to support infrastructure is a critical component. So today, Senator Cantwell is going to talk to you about sustainable aviation fuel and particularly the investments that she believes are a great opportunity under the budget reconciliation passage. And I do really want to highlight that she's been one of the best supporters for the industry, and it's an honor to be here to help support this. Thanks.
Thank you, John. Well, thank you, John. It's been great to work with you over so many years. Commissioner Feldman, thank you. Thank you so much for allowing us to be here today. Diana, thank you for the work that Alaska Airlines continues to do to pioneer in this area. And also want to say to Dr. Walcott, thank you so much for your leadership. It seems like just yesterday that we got the money from Center of Excellence at the FAA to look at this feedstock issue. So I guess you could say that was a great success, because now we're here today to talk about how you scale that feedstock issue to manufacturing and how you get it delivered to the aircraft that need it. So I want to thank everybody, and also obviously Climate Solutions, definitely great. Thank you so much for giving us this big picture look at this. So the issues that we're here today to talk about is, how does the state of Washington continue to be a leader in delivering on the market and development of sustainable aviation fuel? We know this is important to do because we know from smoky skies or record temperatures that we need to do more to address the climate crisis. Every sector in our economy that uses fuel is looking for alternative fuels, and there's some sectors, like the automobile sector, that has gotten, let's just say, way down the road on their changing to alternatives. But travel is still one of the most carbon-intensive activities individuals can engage in. And just today, the UN Secretary General said that, quote, targets set forth by shipping and aviation are not aligned with the goals of limiting global warming. They went on to say, especially in the areas of aviation fuel, we need to do more in the area of adoption. So that's what we're here to talk about today. How do we speed up that level of adoption? We're here to talk about what those solutions look like. Sustainable aviation fuel has the potential to reduce greenhouse gas emissions up to 70%. Our state has already been a leader in doing some of the advanced work on sustainable aviation fuel, but still more needs to be done to make this a manufacturer's market. The state of Washington is well positioned to be a leader in the production, the distribution, and the utilization of sustainable aviation fuel. We have the right feedstocks here. WSU, as we mentioned, through their various projects, have done great work has found enough wood waste and solid waste in the Pacific Northwest to meet the port's 2028 goal that Commissioner Feldman talked about. We have existing infrastructure to build on. Those facilities that were mentioned by John Plaza, already existing facilities in our state. And we have major airports, military facilities, and others that want to use the sustainable aviation fuel. So while we've made big gains in the area of science, we now have to make big gains in the area of manufacturing. Our main challenge now is to develop a dedicated industry of suppliers, refiners, blenders who produce that fuel in significant quantities and at the right price point. So that is why we are supporting in the reconciliation plan a new competitive grant program of $1 billion to the Department of Transportation, where those projects that would be eligible would be those that could produce, transport, blend, store sustainable aviation, and develop and demonstrate how these low emission technologies would apply. So some of the same people here today could also apply for those infrastructure grants. This funding would help build the infrastructure to produce sustainable aviation fuel and get it where it is needed. So those grants could go to developing the product, blending the product, supplying the product, and in the distribution of those products. All of this is based on the research that was done by WSU and MIT and many others in that aviation grant. But now we have to take the next step. We have to help our state, help the sustainable aviation fuel get off the ground and get into the planes that we would like to see. So I thank everyone here for helping us share this goal of getting the manufacturing end of this equation dealt with, incentivized, so that the private sector can take hold and develop this as a solution for the rest of the United States. So thank you all very much. I know this is a big challenge, but we've already been a leader in aviation, so I'm pretty sure we can be a leader in sustainable aviation fuel as well. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Senator Cantwell, and she's available for talking as well of all of us. I just did mean to mention that King County and the Port of Seattle have embarked upon a $500,000 study to look at municipal solid waste being converted into jet fuel for use in SeaTac, and that's going to be getting underway just here soon. As Ms. Plaza said, using waste to make that a valuable thing is a great thing. Anyway, feel free to ask anybody a question, but you really realizing this is all part of the reconciliation bill, and as you can see, the supply chain for fuel, as for everything, is about working together. And so if we're going to build back better, we got to do it together. So anyway, let us open it up for questions.
Senator, you mentioned, I'm sorry, step back up the mic, thank you. The discussion mentioned that airlines are eager to get on board, and you just mentioned that airports and the military are also up for it. How would you gauge that support for this transition to these sustainable fuels?
Well, obviously the airlines are also facing international standards that are being set. We've had a couple of precarious positions over the last several years. So I think everybody is committed to making the change. And so the question is, can you produce a cost-effective, sustainable product? And that's what we need to get at, that next level of the manufacturing, and figure out how to do that at scale. And so you can see that even though we have entrepreneurs here, nobody is stepping up with all of the mechanisms for us to answer those questions. So we think that a little bit of grant incentive could help us get that done.
Doctor, this question might be better suited for you, if you would
Yep.
mind stepping back up there. Diana, you mentioned that you're buying more fuel-efficient airplanes. In terms of the performance of the fuel, how does it compare when it comes to fuel efficiency?
Yeah, thank you. Efficiencies and safety are utmost of importance in terms of the production of these types of fuels. In the sustainable aviation fuel world, a process for conversion to a fuel is first certified through ASTM, and then that fuel is blended and has to be certified under a conventional jet fuel standard. So it passes the same standards and requirements as every conventional jet fuel that's used in a commercial flight today. So that's very important from a safety standpoint, and I think your question also addressed the efficiency issue within that. Because of the fact that in the case of sustainable aviation fuels, oftentimes we build the molecules that we want, then there's opportunity to build not only a cleaner fuel, but a higher efficiency fuel also. And what's important is to get to the production of high enough so that we're able to fly these at large blending ratios, or eventually to meet the carbon goals that President Biden has set, to actually be able to fly 100% sustainable aviation fuel from that, and we'll see significant benefits from that standpoint.
Can I just mention one thing to add on? Actually, two things. One, maybe this goes without saying, but one of the reasons that SAF is such a great tool is it is a drop-in fuel, so you just simply put it in the fuel farm, you put it into the airplane, and a pilot doesn't notice any difference flying with that fuel. There are future opportunities as well to improve that, but right now it's just a phenomenal solution because it integrates so easily within the airline operation. Just on the efficiency front, buying our more efficient airplanes is hugely impactful, but still a fraction of the path to net zero, and not nearly as great a fraction as could be enabled by sustainable fuel. So I think that's another important point. And then finally, to your question about demand, it's important to acknowledge also that the private sector, in addition to airlines, is also creating demand. So we have a deal with Microsoft, for example, where Microsoft and we are working together to use SAF to cover their corporate travel. And other private companies are interested in this as well, because we've all committed to getting to net zero, and we share the carbon emissions from us over to them as well. So hopefully that helps.
Thank you.